I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting article for you today, and it's coming out of Los Angeles, California. Obviously, Los Angeles is not a good place to be a landlord because of all of the tenant protections, the extreme difficulty landlords have in evicting bad tenants. And this story here is a perfect example of that. Okay, so we have a small landlord who owns a 4-unit building in Los Angeles, and one of his tenants is just crazy. Okay, ripping the property apart. They're having to call the police on this guy. This guy is violent. And the landlord's scared for his life, of course. I'd be scared for my life, too, if I had a tenant doing the sort of things that you can see in this video. So, yeah, it's a crazy story, but I thought I would bring it to you because I wanted to show people, what the problems, what the result is when you're investing, when you're buying real estate in a place like Los Angeles where you can't get rid of these bad tenants, okay? This is the ultimate result where this guy who is crazy essentially, or out of his mind, violent, whatever, just cannot be kicked out of the place. And a landlord should never be put into that sort of situation. So yeah, it's a bad situation overall, but I need to put a spotlight on it, shine a light on it. Okay, if you're a small real estate investor and you're looking to buy your first rental property in Los Angeles, think again. Okay, consider investing somewhere else because it might end up happening like it did in this story. So before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like and subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think, okay? So would you, as a beginning real estate investor, would you buy a property in Los Angeles? Let's take the price considerations out of it. Okay, I know that real estate in LA is extremely expensive, and probably even for a very basic low income fourplex, you're probably going to spend over $1 million. But I'm just curious if other people, they are like, oh yeah, we're going to get the appreciation, and oh, I know how to screen tenants, I'll be fine. I hear this story again and again and again, right? But every year, it seems like there's new laws from the state, new laws from the county, and new laws from the city that you have to contend with. And I just don't personally think it's worth it just for the peace of mind, okay? And then if you have a professional tenant who moves in and knows the laws better than you do, well, you're just screwed and you're just going to lose tens of thousands of dollars. So anyway, let's get into this article. This article is coming from abc7.com, and it says, angry tenant kicks, screams, and damages landlord's property near USC campus. A Southern California landlord is concerned for his renters and property, and he continues to deal with a problematic tenant. While the eviction process is underway, it could take much longer than expected. The tenant in question is seen in videos kicking, screaming, and damaging property on his landlord's doorstep at the 4-unit apartment building near the USC campus. The building's owner, Andrew, told Eyewitness News a similar incident happened this week. I was already in bed asleep and he was just banging on my door, kicking it in. I called 911. I called 3 times and I waited 2 hours for a response, he said. He broke 3 cameras outside of my building, kicking in my door. My question is, what is this, okay? What was the reason? Was this guy mad at the landlord, for some reason? Did he think this was going to be the best response for his anger? Or was this a mental health episode or a substance abuse issue? What exactly was the cause of this guy acting like this? I know he didn't, maybe he did. Maybe he just, freaked out and, started acting like this, but who knows? I'd like to hear the rest of the story, what we're missing here. But regardless of the reason, this is not the correct thing to be doing. And this guy, he's got to go, okay? This landlord is in the right to be evicting this person because even if, he doesn't get along with the tenant for whatever reason, they don't need to be there together. And it seems like this small landlord is doing what I did, okay, and he's house hacking, which means that he lives in one of these 4 units and then rents the other 3 out. Now, that is a horrible situation to be in if you have a tenant like this one, okay, because now the tenant knows where you live and can come mess with you. And I always worried about that when I was doing it, and I'm glad that I, don't do that anymore. Andrew says it's not the first time the tenant has acted out. He beat up his mother and the police were called. He beat up his father. I believe it was a week after and the police were called. But police have been little help. Those troubles prompted Andrew to begin the eviction process for his safety and that of his tenants. I do feel responsibility. They've told me that they're in fear too, and I'm doing the most I can. I'm doing the eviction process. It takes months, actually. And even with this problem, it can't be expedited. Wow. Okay, so it sounds like this guy, he got violent with his parents. Okay, so this is, 2 parents and then looks like a older adult child, right, who was living with them. And got into a domestic violence incident, and landlord is in the right for filing eviction against, at least that one tenant, not the parents obviously, but against the child, the adult child, evicting that child because of the domestic violence incidents that went on. And if they're in fear for their life, then I understand why this landlord feels like he has to get this guy out of there. So I bet, and this is what it probably is, right? He thinks that, the landlord is on their side. He's bitter and angry about it and decides to go and, tear his stuff up. I'm not saying that's what happened, but that's what it looks like, okay? So, yeah, I mean, this is a bad situation. You got to get this guy out of there. The police, there's a limited amount they can do. Now, obviously, if the parents don't want that guy there, they could easily file for a protection order against their own son, right? And then he wouldn't be allowed to come back to the property at all without, the police coming by and arresting him. So they didn't do that. Well, at least it doesn't sound like they did that. And now this incident is occurring. So, we've got a crazy situation going on here, and it's made even worse by the fact, and he mentioned that in the last paragraph, that it takes months, okay, and the process can't be expedited even when you have this sort of situation going on. Now, is that the kind of place where you want to be putting your money in and buying properties where, you've got tenants, doing property damage against you, trying to break into your unit where you live, and you can't evict them? No, that's not where I want to invest. For Andrew and other mom and pop landlords, resources are limited. If you actually do a Google search and look, there are plenty of resources for people who are tenants to fight being evicted, but there aren't any resources for the landlord, said Stuart Waldman, president of the Valley Industry and Commerce Association. Waldman says pending legislation in the city could make it even tougher, barring landlords like Andrew from considering credit histories, prior evictions, and convictions for violence or sexual assaults. Yeah, and I covered all those topics, okay? Los Angeles has been making all these ridiculous proposals, and it just will make it very difficult to be a small landlord in particular. Now, they always say, oh, well, we're going against, these people who are, big landlords, and they're rich, and they can handle it, right? Not even realizing that small landlords exist. Okay? Or that small landlords have to comply by the exact same rules that you put in place for the landlord who has 1,000 units, even if you own one single family house. So, a guy in this situation who just wants to live in one of his units, rent out the other 3, is getting his door nearly beat down by a crazy guy who he can't evict. Bad situation overall. How is a landlord really supposed to make a decision on who to pick to be a tenant if they were to pass, Waldman asked. For now, Andrew has to wait and hope for the best as the process plays out. Yeah, and the whole thing about not allowing them to use background investigations to screen tenants, that is one of the worst ways to to treat a landlord, okay? How are you supposed to know who you could put in your property, who is, criminals even, right? And they're it's this bleeding heart, far left leaning, progressive policy where they feel worse for the criminals, the bad guys, than they do for the victims of their crimes, And so you end up with landlords who, their hands are tied. They just can't do anything, and they get punished by the city for wanting to operate their business there. So yeah, interesting story. I feel bad for this guy here. Hopefully he gets this tenant out of his property as soon as possible.